coming surprising honor for me to introduce Stuart, whom I know for 25 years or 30 years, and he was working for decades at the George Washington University, management, faculty of management, and his first-rate cybernetician or first order, second order were involved within this field from the 1970s onward. Pioneer of second order cybernetics, and Stuart, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Well, you've asked me to do a little conversational workshop. I did one of these before at one of these conferences. People seem to like it, so I said, sure, I'll do it again. But this will be a little different. Okay, what I thought I would do is just go through a number of trends and events today to sort of remind you of what we have all experienced in the last few decades. The younger people may not have experienced as much as the older ones, but nevertheless, things have changed a lot in the last few decades, so I just wanted to review that to sort of lay a common foundation, and then I wanted to brainstorm, and we'll go around the room and everybody introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll do a sort of brainstorming exercise, and you'll get to a chance to contribute your ideas to the conversation. So, just as a way of setting a common foundation, let me suggest that there have been a number of technical trends, like the spread of personal computers, growth of the internet and e-commerce, the invention of social media, big data and data analytics, e-books and access to journals online. Those of us who've been in the research field for a long time know that the way we do research has changed quite dramatically. There have been institutional trends like the monitoring of consumer behavior by advertisers, monitoring of email traffic by national intelligence agencies, the importance of patents in e-commerce. The patent office in Washington, D.C. is not in a building now, it's in a campus, because people rely on patents as the foundation of e-commerce. There are new degree programs in data analytics, new degree programs in cybersecurity. And there have been trends and ideas, too. For example, in the 50s and 60s, there was a split between the philosophical and biological cybernetics on the one hand, and computer and electrical cybernetics on the other hand. Most people know about computers and the internet. They don't know that there's a general theory of control and communication, a general theory of information and regulation. And if they know about it, they don't know very much about it. Centers and institutes and systems in cybernetics were established on campuses in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, largely as a result of the experiences during World War II, when people worked together in multidisciplinary teams to solve problems of the World War, coding, the atomic bomb, logistics, operations research, the movement of women into industrial jobs, and so forth. But those centers and institutes were very often and almost completely shut down in the 80s and 90s as a result of a number of influences, accrediting organizations, the academic tendency for narrow specialization, and so forth. But more narrow fields, like computer science, operations research, systems engineering, and artificial intelligence, have thrived. So new things have come out of it, but they tended to be more narrow than the broader fields. Cybernetics was once thought to offer a common language for social, biological, and engineering disciplines, any control processes, whether it's a thermostat on the wall, or homeostasis within the body, or the multitude of institutions in the social system, all obey certain basic principles. But that isn't much discussed in the forum today. Meanwhile, new conceptions of cybernetics and science have been created and are attracting some attention. Now, the larger context of global trends is that we have a concern about climate change, weather, loss of species. There's difficulty coping with immigration in the States and Europe. There's concern with the stability of financial There are worries about the stability of technical infrastructure, banks and pipelines. There are worries about resource scarcity, water, agricultural lands, energy. There are early incidents of cyber warfare, theft of intellectual property, identity theft, the Stuxnet virus, and we have terrorism by state and non-state actors. But in the midst of all these troubles, we have an emerging global university system, which we're all part of to some degree. It's made possible by low-cost travel, allows us to meet frequently. The internet enables co-authoring of academic papers and cooperation on research projects. The Bologna process, which has been active in Europe but it's spread as far as Central Asia, is a way of standardizing curricula and facilitates the movement of students and faculty members among universities. That's an institutional change. Then there was the collapse of the USSR, which reduced constraints on academic cooperation. And now we have a strong desire to rise in university rankings, which is good for improving universities around the world, but it's increasing competition, particularly in the production of research articles. And one of the things I like about Najib's emphasis is on cooperation between academia and business and government. It's not so strong an emphasis on research, but it's more a matter of communicating with a larger society, which is an increasing theme now. Now, there are basically two metaphors for how do you think about this interconnected university system. You can think of a global brain or a global university system. I like the global university system idea because there are multiple autonomous actors, cooperation among the parts is voluntary, and there are university values which emphasize honesty, openness to criticism, testing claims against experience, development of consensus over time. Universities have shared goals, even though they're in very different countries, understanding how the world works, and passing on previous knowledge. Also, the personnel system in universities is based on talent, hard work, and elections, as opposed to nepotism, family relationships, and so on. So I prefer the global university system. I think it's quite compatible with democracy. So the current situation, ending now, is that we have unprecedented challenges. We have unprecedented technical and managerial capability. But we have multiple systems problems at a time of fewer academic programs and systems thinking, design, and problem solving. So I think Najib is really on the right track to say we need to think again about a more multidisciplinary focus and structure and reward system in universities. So I suggest that we begin thinking about this. But first, I'm going to go around the room and find out who we are. So if you would just say a few words about yourself very briefly.
And I'm closely from university in Boston, and my area is working of the mind, the symmetric theory.
Tell us your name and country. Colombia.
East of Colombia. Russell Handel, National University, I'm in mathematics.
Okay.
Tom Marlowe. Really want me to speak up?
Yes.
I can do that. But Seton Hall University in New Jersey, mathematics, computer science, and whatever any one of my colleagues is interested in.
I'm Manoj Kumar Singh from India. I'm doing research from IIT Delhi.
on strategy, competitiveness.
Okay.
I'm Vladimir Volkanov, I'm from Bulgaria, and I'm software engineering to testing systems in UK.
Okay.
My name is Jorge Ibarez from Argentina, the National University of Patagonia, Australia. My interest is in learning environment and organizational environment.
Okay.
William Simpson in the United States. My research is in enterprise computing systems and specialty security.
Okay.
My name is Maria. I came from Venezuela, but I'm working on Ecuador, and my research is about neurolinguistical programmation.
Okay. Let's go back here.
Yo Luis Rojano, Universidad de La Guajira, Colombia.
Okay.
Pilar Pomarico, Universidad de La Guajira, Colombia.
Octavio Henao, University of Antioquia, Colombia. Medellín, Colombia.
Okay.
Dorita Adriana Ramírez, Medellín, Colombia, Universidad de Antioquia.
All right.
My name is Tilia Stingel. I'm from Brazil, but I work in Austria, and I'm from Academia Nova, it's the University of Applied Science, and work in the field of communication science and knowledge management.
Okay, good. Let's raise the volume a little if we can.
Hashimoto from Japan, biomedical engineer.
Mi nombre es José Luis Rauca, soy ingeniero mecánico, soy profesor en la Escuela Superior Politécnica de Chimborazo de Ecuador.
Okay.
Leônidas Barros from Pontifícia Universidade Católica de Minas Gerais, Brasil. I deal with mathematics, geography, and information systems.
Okay. There.
Mireille Carrère, France, and my research field is information science.
Okay.
So my name is Ilya Farag. I'm working in the University of Education in Freiburg, Germany, as a social scientist and focusing on sociology of technology and sociology of health.
Okay.
I'm Gabriela Villanova. I'm from Patagonia Australian University, Argentina. My research is software architecture, modeling and design systems.
Okay, let's go back here.
Okay, since nobody stand up, I stand up.
All right.
Dr. Carlos is a wonderful man. For the past 3 months, he sent me at least 3,000 emails. And he knows who I am, nobody else does. Okay, my name is Donald Su, HSUI from New York City. Okay.
My name is Thai Bukwan. I come from Thailand. My research about mechanical engineering and intelligent system for mechatronics and robotics.
Okay.
My name is Monica Merino Santana. I am a lecturer, and my research area is about financial informatics. I am Samia Rafael from University of Paraguay, Venezuela. I work in the physics department, and I'm doing my PhD in engineering, environmental engineering.
I'm Bob Churiga. I work in the industry for the Miner Corporation here in the U.S. in software systems engineering.
Joe Bersama, I also work for my corporation and work in communications.
Good. Okay.
I'm Umpleby, and I'm an architect, and I'm a graduate student currently, and I'm tracing and writing history about how BCL and management risk will impact the architecture. And I'm really interested in Francisco Varela's later work and how he connects these theories to Buddhism and how possibly it could help with it.
Excellent.
Ulrich Meyer, from the University of Education Freiburg. I'm a sociologist in public health research.
I'm Erwin Visser. I work at SOA ACE Nederland, which is an organization who promotes safe sex in the Netherlands. I'm responsible for the Dutch safe sex campaigns for the past 15 years, and we're working with a lot of different universities and governments and companies to be able to do what we do. And basically, most of my interest goes to e-health.
My name is Alan Valderon. I am a researcher for PUCP, Pontifícia Universidad Católica del Perú. My topic of research is mechatronics.
I'm Najib Kalaos. I'm a retired professor from the University of Simon Bolívar in Venezuela.
I'm with an institute in Austria and work also at the University of Ljubljana, and for 2 years I've now fallen in love with second order science. Maybe more Wednesday.
Jeremy Ward. I'm under the illusion that I was hired in Mexico, San Felipe, Mexico. And my philosophy, despite the way I look, that I actually have background in it, in logic and political philosophy and consciousness studies. And I'm also the CEO of the Inventors Assistance League, talking about illusions. So if you want to talk about innovation and invention and all that stuff, I guess I'm the one to converse with.
I'm Carlos Montenegro. I work in Universidad Distrital from Bogotá, Colombia. I research in informatic systems.
Guillermo Montenegro, Colombia.
I'm Christina Miller from the United States, and I am a nursing faculty. I'm Janice Saron. I'm from the University of South Alabama, and my research the last couple of years has been on team-based learning, which helps teach problem solving, critical thinking, and also interprofessional practice and education for the health sciences.
I am Renata Aracha from Brazil. I'm professor of the graduate program of information science in Federal University of Minas Gerais, Brazil. My research is about information science, linking signals, of programs, and using computer science.
I'm Kessia. I'm a student.
Uli Schmidt, I'm Professor for Knowledge Management at Stellenbosch University in South Africa.
مرحبا أنا خينا عندي دكتور architecture from Jordan teaching in Saudi Arabia. Architecture management is we need in psychology, sociology, history, engineering.
I'm Bridget Moore. I'm from the University of South Alabama College of Nursing. And my interests are healthcare administration, informatics, and interdisciplinary collaboration in healthcare systems.
Hello, my name is Joachim Metzger. I'm from Germany. I'm working for the BMW Group, and I'm also doing a PhD at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technologies. My field of research is cross-industry collaboration and business modeling in this context.
Hello, my name is Omar Daniel Castellón. I'm from Colombia. I work at the National University of Colombia, and my research area is marine engineering.
Okay. Great. Well, this is an impressive group. I mean, the diversity in fields and countries is just amazing. It's all together. Okay. So, I suggest we answer this question. What is working now? And what I want you to do is write down on a sheet of paper. These have been written on before, so write on the back side. Take 4 or 5 or 6 pieces of paper each person. Because we're going to do this several times. You can write as many of these as you want, so you can turn them over. So you'll put lines with the blanket shut. And take one of these pens. If they're not enough for each person to have one, then share with your neighbor. And what we're going to do is post these up on the board and then cluster them. And the purpose of all this is to find out what we're thinking. Okay. To see visually what is going on in the minds of the people here on the subject of academic globalization.
So, just to refine.
Yes.
What you're saying is, what now is succeeding as current practice?
Yes. In other words, low-cost air travel is succeeding pretty well. The internet is succeeding pretty well. And then the question will be, I'll just lead you through the series of questions. Why is it working? What makes it work? And then what is our vision of the future? And then what actions would be helpful in bringing about the vision of the future? Okay. So assuming that we like academic globalization, we think it's important in solving multidisciplinary problems, how do we make it work better? Right? Okay, so what is working now? The way I want you to do this, it has to be visible from the back of the room. So do it landscape, not portrait, and write like 3 words in large letters, like high-speed internet, or something along those lines, or lower-cost computers, or multidisciplinary research institutes. Whatever it is that you think is contributing to a positive academic globalization, write it on here. And then we'll post them up on the board and find out what everybody's thinking. Tell me something.
I think what I see in the question, what is working now, and I'm not formulating things that well because I'm so damn tired. But you say what works now, and I see this as kind of like, correct me if I'm wrong about the terminology, what I would call an implied question. How many times did you beat the dog last night? Well, I'm saying, well, wait a minute, what works? And I really question that, and so I drew a little diagram here. And I think this is the thing, you talk about academics, I would kind of argue that, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure, you go back to that previous slide, about all the mechanical things and how we solve problems, and this is the whole discussion that we're going to have this afternoon about instruction versus education. I would not put, and obviously this is important, I would not put the idea of how we're going to solve global warming and stuff like that in necessarily in the area of academics as a result of an academics. It's a technology as opposed to what gave rise to it. I would argue, because I'm a philosopher, I can get away with crap like this. I would argue that academics basically is more in the lines of all the more flowery things, who we are, what we're about, all the purpose of why we have an educational liberal arts, thinking for thinking's sake, and all those nice things. I would argue that the things that are very important, that those are the results of an academic, and those are technological questions. And so I think it gets into this thing here. Really, a problem is, if I put a dollar sign over the world, we think that's academics. I would argue that's not academics, that's technology.
Okay, this is one idea. Let's get some more going. Yes. Yes, please.
E-learning, teleconferencing, telepresence of 3D holographic projections online.
Online education. Great. Yes.
Intercultural communication.
Yes, we're certainly getting more of that. Okay, somebody else.
Let me follow up on that because I think that.
So what works and what doesn't work, and what do you mean by that?
I think that there's a granularity that we're ignoring. Not only does internet, email, and these other tools bring together people from far apart. I know from my own experience, it's talking to people in other departments and disciplines on my own campus, much easier. It's much easier to carry on a continuous relationship and exchange ideas.
So you get more exchanges of ideas in the same period of time?
Well, because you can, for one thing, forward other people's remarks. For another, it's asynchronous but continuing. I don't have to arrange to meet someone or happen to meet someone. I can continue a conversation.
And that leads to greater efficiency in the use of your time?
It leads to, I think, more analogy formation, more
analogy.
Well, if we talk about the same thing, and we have different reactions, the two different reactions give you two different views on the problem, which sometimes is very helpful.
Right. Yes?
All that's kind of for the internet and web, but the most important thing is that they enable joint research across continents and even joint education. I have today a student from Europe, from Russia, and of course in America. And it is possible even without physically moving and transferring their credit from one university to another. Of course, this kind of logistics of this should be improved, but it is possible to do today.
Yes. Okay. Somebody else?
Yes.
Biotechnology. Okay. Great.
I think this point of technology is the same as what I think that's not necessarily academic, but this open a lot of a whole of new possibilities. And one of these, I think, this crowdfunding, for example, where you can open a platform where you can finance in your research if you find enough people that are willing to pay for your research. For
Crowdsourcing.
Crowdsourcing. Right.
Okay, crowdsourcing.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
I had another. And social networking is working very well.
Yep.
So that we can keep in touch and have a lot of news. I have on my timeline in Facebook a lot of things of scientific work. So every day I have new information what's happening now in scientific work. So I think this is these are fields of. I would keep only social network because the other one I said another word for it.
So I have three of them here, but they basically improve communications. But I'm of two minds. The improved communication is a positive. It's what's working now. It's also a burden because it's giving me a lot of communication I don't want. So we got easy network communities. Research is openly available. I can go on the web and find research on almost any disciplinary or interdisciplinary topic. I can get a hold of the names of the authors. I can get the email. I can start a conversation, which is all good. But it generally spawns about 50 times as much communication as I want. So.
Okay. Somebody else?
Well, following up on that quickly, is the online research repositories allow your work to have a great deal more breadth of impact? They don't necessarily say depth, breadth of impact than they would otherwise.
I also said that academic research databases and math, there are some online repositories like RT and other things. But just the fact you have things like JSTOR and academic and there is academic databases, you can get a lot of articles that might take a long time.
That works both ways, also your work.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, from the organizational side, I think what is relatively new is that there are a lot of internationalization strategies, even of smaller universities and universities of applied sciences, etc., to get some money from the government for exchange programs, etc. So I think this is very important. Relative.
Okay. Yes, no, I think I get the idea. Yes.
I agree with her. It's working in learning and learning social media, but we have to consider what happens when communication is not good. Have a system problem because of that.
Okay.
qualitative, but not everyone, so that not everyone is able to use it. Second, also increasement or knowledge generation, also with a but, because it's also on quantitative level in my opinion, and not on qualitative.
Okay, good. Others? Yes.
Maybe connecting with the colleague, the resources. If the resources are made with the standard way, like a e-learning content, and with the e-learning network, it will be much easier because the connectivity and the mobile devices are well spread in nowadays, and it will become a big content and a big impact on the society.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is a lot of changes in the way we communicate, the possibilities of online learning and online research, some new funding opportunities.
Oh my gosh, one more on that.
Are smaller universities in smaller countries benefiting more than big universities in big countries, or is it the reverse?
That, at least in this country, it's sometimes hard, although it's becoming easier to get funding for interdisciplinary research, but it's fairly easy to get funding for pedagogical proposals that are interdisciplinary, based on improving teaching or integrating disciplines or retaining, preparing students. So maybe that means that the research is half a generation away, I hope. If we get enough students through a pipeline who have this more disciplinary focus, and enough recognition that the pedagogy is desirable, maybe research will also be desirable.
Okay. Who is adapting to these changes better, the faculty or the students? And are the students different? Are the students that you have now different from the students that you had 10 or 15 years ago in terms of their knowledge of what's happening around the world?
See, in the States, I'm not sure if that's really happening. All the audience I'm seeing, I'm not sure if it's done. I'm not sure that hasn't had a reverse effect because in many ways, people are looking more at a soundbite approach to things rather than having more of an in-depth understanding of things. So I'm not
Write that down.
I think it might have had a reverse effect in some cases.
Okay.
I think the change in academics is harder on instruction. With the ready access of information at our fingertips, the actual testing of students' knowledge is no longer based on facts. It's based on integration of those facts into concepts, and it's a much harder conversation and a much harder testing process to realize whether a student has done the latter instead of the former. The days of multiple choice quizzes are over because all the answers to all the multiple choice quizzes can be done in his pocket on a phone while you're not looking at it. So you have to actually have his ability to grab facts together and put them into concepts, and that needs to be what's tested. So I think it's much harder on the faculty than it is on the students.
Try to write that down in a few words, because I think that's the kind of interesting insight that I'm hoping to get out of this.
It's like knowledge acquisition and knowledge transfer, I think is what you're talking about. We used to just look at whether or not they grasped the knowledge from the lectures, but now we're looking at how they're applying it and their ability to transfer it.
I'll give you an example. I'm teaching a class for a friend of mine. It wasn't even my course, actually in cryptography. And while I'm talking about public key infrastructure and certificates, guys in the back are using their phones looking up certificate authorities and things like that, and asking questions where on my dissertation defense I didn't expect. Now, those of you that have been through this process realize your dissertation defense is when you're the dumbest guy in the universe. You've got a room full of experts quizzing you on all the subjects that they tried to give you some insight to. And here I am at the front of the classroom, and all of the students out there can get up to speed and have knowledge at their fingertips faster than I can actually cover the material. Now, in order for me to look out over that audience then and come back and say, have I taught you anything, is a very difficult process.
Okay. Others have similar experiences?
I think you're getting to the idea of getting kids back to academics. I think we're talking about technological globalization. With academics suffering too much information. I think the people who get caught in facts and stuff like this, rather than the process of learning, or we teach us more the reason why we're learning, which I think we totally miss. Out after the fact to figure out how to apply something and make something work. I think we've lost the scope of this whole thing.
Other thoughts along this line?
Coming back to the word consistent. Nowadays, according to such a problem, getting information in learning in the whole process, I think the adaptation in the organization of the scientific content is much important for the students and also for us, like teachers. We can make the system personalized about the interest and the point of view of the student will be much successful. And for their interest to learn something new.
Okay. All right. So a lot of our conversation up to now has been how individual faculty members are adjusting to this and relative to the students and so on. What about institutional arrangements? Maybe new centers and institutes, maybe different design of curricula. Many universities are setting up campuses in other countries. Do you all have experience with those things? Is that important to you? Do you think it's a trend that won't last? How are we benefiting from the ability to communicate so much more easily with people in other countries?
As far as interdisciplinary institutes, one gets the idea that most successful interdisciplinary projects, going back to Najib's idea of pathos of interest, come about because a small number of people who are interested in similar things talk to one another. They may be motivated by grant, they may be motivated by a research problem, or who knows, a blog post, something like that. But it is not clear to me that it's at the point where it can be institutionalized. You can't, it's like arranging for math faculty. You say, okay, your job is to prove 2 theorems this week and find a counterexample. It's just not going to happen. It has to, at this point at least, be natural. Flow from shared interests. And what you can do, I think, is to set up a location, to set up an arrangement where that can be facilitated, but you cannot force it. We don't have the background, most of us, to bring it about now.
I think one great benefit is that you have the knowledge or information is much more democratized. So you have it for everyone who wants to. So if you don't understand anything, something, so you can go to the YouTube. You get the whole completely teaching course about everything, or you can read something, or you can get information as much as you want, and build your own knowledge, so without having professors or doctors, the only people that have this knowledge.
Yeah, so the technology has made it possible at a reasonably low cost to get access to information that was just not available before. Has this helped people do multidisciplinary research? Are people using this capability to learn about other disciplines? Or are people sticking within their own field?
I would say both.
Yeah.
Both.
But I I'm wrong, okay? But according to what I heard in informal conversation, most of the people, they are sticking to the discipline because of the requirement they're having for the promotion, you see. The requirement is disciplinary requirement. And if that's true, I'm not sure if that's true. If that's true, something should be done in order to, I don't know what, because there is a lot of new books about the new American universities. And most of them, they agree that something should be done. One of them was the book written by the president of Harvard, and the other one, the president of Arizona, University of Arizona. The one that really did something according to the book, because I was not there, is in Arizona. And you can count with your fingers how many universities are doing something about the problem.
To be fair, Najib, I suspect that a large number of the people who are doing the complaining are the people who are using it as an excuse for their own personal tastes. Not all of them. Some of the very hardest ones are undoubtedly being
I never thought about that, but you might be right. Yeah, I never thought about that.
I work in a research and development office though, and that is a big problem, is a lot of grant mechanisms want this interdisciplinary collaboration, and then when you bring the players to the table, it becomes, well, there's 5 of us, and if I'm the author, that means nothing. Or it's not discipline specific to me, so in my 10-year promotion, I don't get things. So before we can even get to the problem, if we're interested in working together, it's all this 10-year promotion stuff that prohibits people from doing something they may want to do just because they're not going to get the credit they need to go ahead and get to the next level.
But on the other hand, Jennifer, you'll also see 5 people get together on that same proposal and try to figure out how to divide it up and divide it completely, which doesn't work, by the way, usually. Different projects that somehow fit under the same umbrella because they can't think of working outside their own areas. So both of these are factors.
I hear this complaint a lot, that tenure and promotion criteria are preventing interdisciplinary collaboration. Who has heard of a solution to this?
The issue is complexity. So in order to deal with complexity, one of the basic things that we do as a natural tendency is to break it down into little pockets where we can make our checklist and check our facts and put that compartment away. So part of our education process ought to be on dealing with complexity and how one sorts that out. And it's not just compartmentalizing, it's also compartmentalizing the relationships between those compartments that you build out. So your compartmentalization has to have some real meaning in terms of everybody else in the map, not just some subject that you parcel out. So I think the teaching of complexity, and that's also the problem with having ready facts at your fingers when you're trying to teach a subject. Instead of teaching the facts, the compartmentalization stuff, we need to teach the handling of complexity and the actual problem-solving skills that we need. And that can work both on the academic side, the professorial side, where we worry about tenure and things like that, and also on the student side, to turn the academics back into a teaching of thought processes and problem solving instead of facts.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there are 2 factors here. One is the multidisciplinary overlaps with multi-authorship. So it's the easiest thing in the world. You have 3 authors, put in 2 more, and that helps them with promotion and tenure. So the people awarding promotion and tenure said, how do I know those 2 people did anything? So there has to be some way to deal with multi-authorship. The other thing I wanted to say is the journals themselves. If I'm in discipline X, I submit an article to journal X as a journal in X, they send it out to referees or experts in X. It means something if I get published in that journal because it was refereed by people who are expert. But supposing people from disciplines X, Y, and Z get together and publish, well, who are the referees? Who are the journals? So I really think that you have to go higher up. If you had recognized journals that are known for their interdisciplinary nature, and it happens quite frequently in mathematics. There's a journal of mathematics and music today. There's a journal of art and music. here, and they say, go ahead.
Let me follow up on that before. I just want to say one more thing very quickly, and the other problem is on ranking tenure cases. External evaluators have to be found to appreciate all the disciplines involved in a paper.
I agree 100%.
I mean, I see that as another restriction to interdisciplinary communication, the journals, the disciplinary journals. Because it's not easy to write difficult things in an easy way. So if you don't write difficult things in an easy way to understand, you cannot make interdisciplinary communication. So this is something really difficult to be done. And it's not being, there is no benefit in it. On the contrary, the benefit is in something easy, is to write in the context of a discipline that anyone with 2 fingers in his head can do it. The difficult thing is to write disciplinary thing in non-technical terms. That's really difficult. That's not easy.
As I've been listening to this conversation, it seems to me that we focus very heavily on research and education. But Najeeba's been talking also about practice and consulting and working with society. And in my experience, the people who made major contributions to multidisciplinary work, I'm thinking of Stafford Beard, Russell Laycock, and so forth, they were consultants. They were practical people, Edward Deming, and so forth. They had to solve problems, and they developed multidisciplinary approaches, which have had some effect on universities, not as much as I think they should. Is that one way of generating more multidisciplinary collaboration?
I'm just trying to be very interested in this. So the Society of Actuaries had exactly the problem you had, namely that when they spoke to industry, industry said, the industry and academia, industry said, you don't know what goes on in the world, so we're not interested in what you tell us. And the acquisitions told industry, you know what goes on in the real world, you can't write a math paper. So the Society of Actuaries had this problem to create an interdisciplinary approach between industry and the academic world. And what it did, and this is just one idea, it created a status, Center of Actuarial Excellence. So there are now about 2 dozen in the world, and I think we were the 25th to become that. And you have to meet some very strict criteria in terms of faculty still apply and research to become that. But the idea, and the society gives you the right to say that, so you attract students. It's not about promotion and tenure, but about enrollment. So that's another factor of universities, and it gives stipends. And in doing this, it's just started 2 or 3 years ago. It hopes that down the road, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, there'll be more discussion between industry and academia because of these centers of excellence. So this is one way of doing the exact thing that Najib is asking for, but it's creating a status, creating criteria for it, and promoting it.
This one of the, I think, gets into the whole idea of discipline. Is that I think discipline is used as an instrument of power. I have a discipline. So what you do, you create a specialty area with all the stuff that goes with it. So it's legitimate activity. But I think when you get back to this idea of tenure, promotions, stuff like the journals, and all that stuff, I think one of the real issues is the politics. Using that discipline is to lord it over somebody. Knowledge is power, in a sense. I think that's one of the things we're really running into. So I really have problems with the word discipline. This is a discipline. You're going to study that discipline, this one, this one. I have problems with that. There is such a thing as discipline.
I think we're supposed to take a break at 3 o'clock.
Oh, yes. Right.
So I would like for you all to reflect upon these
Yes,
issues.
the second part of the same
and
workshop.
answer all these unanswered questions when we return.
You were writing down. The last one I gave you.
It was
the low level, low cost.
Oh yes. Power generation, water filtration,
Et cetera. I have another one.
Okay.
Do you think that we can make a real and effective academic globalization without the area of intercultural communication?
quite imagine how that would happen. I mean, it's obviously people are going to become more aware of cultural differences. They're getting half the people who think differently.
It's not easy, eh? Yeah. Well, it's not easy. I live in three cultures: the Arabic culture, the Latin American culture, and the American culture, the USA culture.
And I was in the
And they are really different. Different. Because something that is usual, for example, in the States, in the Arabic culture, could be an insult. I'm going to give you an example. My father, he passed away 10 years ago. If I sit like that in front of him, he would suffer, he would stand up, and he would leave the room. Because I'm facing his face to my shoe. 40 years I tried to explain him that this is not insulting Venezuela. And he died without accepting that. Just an example. And he suffered every time that he saw anyone, even in the TV, doing like that, facing the...
What was his nationality?
He suffered that.
What was his
He
nationality?
was from Syria, and he was Catholic. But the culture is the culture. So how you can achieve academic globalization without solving the intercultural communication?
I think this really bears on a problem of, I would say, in the same genre as ideology, Bible thumping, ISIS, all that stuff comes to mind when somebody is in that rut, that they accept a body of system of ideas without question. Idea of the, for whatever reason, it will not, it's not, there's no process. It's all object. That's why I've had problems with some of this stuff here. So rather than a fluidity, that anything, I call it relative absolutism, you accept a set of ideas and processes contingently, and on a contingent basis. But these individuals, for some reason, will not, there's no contingency process at all. The ideas are arrested. So I put all those things in that same category. I think why, I don't know. Might be some neurological processes involved.
Yes, it is a neurological process.
That's DSM, that's diagnostic statistical manual time, I think.
Jeremy, you can't avoid, I mean, this is the weak Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
I didn't read it.
The weak Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, that your language forces some, and its idioms force some habits of thought on you, the systemics, the prosaic.
Actually, I found something in Whorf that he does not say that. It's very interesting. I think it's on page 62, actually. I came across it because everybody, the Whorfian hypothesis is that the language drives the idea. Whorf does not say that to the guy.
No, I'm talking about the weak hypothesis, which just says it makes some things easier to say, some things harder to conceive. It makes some, but you're.
But he'll argue that the neurological process drives the language.
But it drives it in so many different ways. Let's not take that part of the argument offline.
Yeah.
But I can no more necessarily control the societal reaction to some, say, standing close to someone, or looking someone directly in the eye, which in some cultures is necessary, and in other cultures is problematic, maybe even insulting. You have idioms that are natural in English that would be, perhaps because they mentioned dogs or something else, be very offensive in Arabic. You can't completely get away from it.
It's almost Pavlovian. It's almost Pavlovian in your neurological, but your whole neural
You
structure.
can peel away some of it. You're not going to peel it all away. Okay,
Let me ask some questions just to get a sense, help us get a sense of who we are as a group. How many of you have spent time at a university in another country than your original country? I suspect it's high. 1, 2, many of you have degrees in more than one field? This is an unusual group.
We're the norm.
How many of you have worked on a multidisciplinary research project?
That's a tricky question.
Yeah, it's a tricky question.
Multi-cross.
Okay, that's the highest number so far. Okay. How many of you have published articles in a journal, or published an article in a journal outside your major field? Just almost every.
I don't know if I encountered none, because I don't know the major field.
If you had a major field, had you published outside.
How many of you teach in a field other than your PhD field? Those of you.
I know more than my first PhD.
I think it's safe to say this is an unusual group. Cybernetics is always like that. It's a group of outliers.
We can outlie anyone.
Okay, so given the fact that we all seem to be up against the problem of narrow reward systems and broad interest, does anybody have any ideas on how the reward system can be changed to encourage multidisciplinary research?
A generic thing, especially for somebody like me, I guess, to look at the ethos. I think what we really have to look at is the value of education. We're going to have a little thing, a little while about education, training, and stuff like that, and academics, not technology. And I think we need to say, what is the reward for being educated? We better start looking at ethos.
Okay.
I think that no matter how much we try to say that the peer review system, either for articles or tenure applications or grants or whatever, or promotions, the whole bit, or industry funding or whatever, is problematic, we have to find a way of either developing interdisciplinary referees or integrating the opinions of referees from different disciplines. And somebody has to recommend those. I don't know whether we need a clearinghouse or some process for making sure that if I have a paper that's in mathematical psychology that we can get, that's a cheap one, we can do it. But just for the record, get a mathematician and a psychologist if we need it.
Something is being worked out now, but I think it was not effective up to the present. Is to have the usual pre-publication peer reviewing and the post-publication peer reviewing. But for some reason, unexpectedly for me, it is not working.
Regarding that, I once saw a journal, I think the Brooks Institute, and the articles were published in there, and then after they were published, it's not so much of a peer review, people wrote comments, basically referee comments on the article in public, they were identified, and the author was allowed to respond. So that's one vehicle. So you have an article, and then you maybe have 2 or 3 questions and responses, and that's one vehicle for encouraging them.
Let me give you an example, the closest one to me, but there is a lot of them. We opened in the journal for the issue related to the plenary session, spaces for comments. We use the same software that Fox knew. Exactly the same software, which is a very good one. And unexpectedly, we had almost 0 comment post-reviewing comments.
Well, here's an idea. Again, you're looking at it in the wrong way, because I once had something, and someone told me they got a course in this way. They created a course and no one came. And they went to the dean and said, well, no one came because it's just new. And if you throw it away, they're not going to come again. But if they know it's here every semester, even though we have no one here, eventually they'll get enough population. Now that's an easy argument for an academic to make, but it's a hard argument for a dean to do. This is a course in basic Hebrew at university. And I don't know what he did, but he pushed it through, and now that's a major course, and they get 20 people or so every semester. So the point is, you have to do something, you have to invite people, you have to wait 2 or 3 years, but the way you assess it is not when you get a response immediately. After a while.
I can share my experience in this area. When 12 years ago I saw that there was no journal that would publish my paper, I found a new journal. Today this journal has impact factor 9.5. If some people don't know what the impact factor of 9.5 is, very, very high. It is like fourth in the field of biophysics. It is number 4 in the world. And so how we did it? An important thing was that we invited, and that's related to what Nejim says, that we invited people, when we publish paper, we invite people who will write comments. Not really like review, but short comment. In your field, what you like, what you don't like, or what you would add to the journal. And I think that was a significant part of this success. And so you need really to invite people, give them opportunity to write, and everybody who is invited would be very happy to write. If it is a short thing, one page, everybody can write.
I was just thinking about your problem one way, and I don't know if this is reasonable or not, is to sort of create a 50-50 rule. Ask deans and other people who look at promotion kind to say, well, we understand your concerns about an interdisciplinary article, we can review it, but if the faculty members involved publish a disciplinary article, so each of them publish a disciplinary article, and then in addition they publish an interdisciplinary article on the same content, that should have like more weight. In other words, try and meet, in the absence of things like new journals and adequate referees, try and use the existing system saying, if we do something new and it overlaps with something that you already accept, it should count twice. And that's one idea of how to advocate it. And then after a while, you have new journals and other things.
I think reward systems has always something to do with acknowledgement. So I was thinking maybe it's possible, all the reward systems are based on institutional acknowledgement. And I was thinking if it's possible to create or develop systems which are non-institutional, which also improve our work or the productivity of our work. We can discuss. I have no answer to that, but
as an example.
As an example, for example, be honest of how our idea emerged, an idea that we have, or some theory that we develop. We were talking previously about inventions, and usually when we have, I think, before we invent something, we have an idea. And this idea may be inspired by other people, by a group of people, through knowledge exchange. But we don't mention it in our publications or in our teachings. We just say, this is my invention. And if we acknowledge that this invention has emerged much more complex than just in an isolated individual, then maybe it may be a kind of different reward system.
Okay. Others?
Yes. It's not that easy to formulate. Maybe this is a question to you and to the audience. If I understand you right, then you ask about a link between improvement of real life problems or situation of the world, etc., and multidisciplinary research. And the discussion very fast switched to internal problems of the academic field.
Yes.
So we need reviewer, more reviewer. Now we have a journal with an impact factor of 9.5. Congratulations. But the problem is, what does this have to do with real life problems and the solving of real life problems? I don't understand the link yet. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I have an example that will emphasize on what he's saying. I recently was invited to a conference in a university in Latin American country. I'm not going to say the name. I stayed 2 hours with the person who was inviting me, telling her why she shouldn't invite me. I swear to God, 2 hours I've been with her, telling her you should not invite me because I am against all what you are doing. And if you invite me, I'm going to say it. I'm not going to say the other thing. The conference was about how journals of high impact. I told her, in your university, you should impact the society, not impact someone in Russia or in Japan or in the United States that read your paper. So your problem would not be solved by impact factor. No, come and say that. So I went over there. And I was all of the people over there were editor-in-chief of different journals. And I was the only voice against all of them. So it happened that I had an informal conversation with the president of the university. And I told him what's happened, that I've been for 2 hours saying not invite me. And then I told him I am sorry that I am hurting your intention of what I was doing. He said, I know you are right. I told him, if this university is going to innovation, impact factor is not the way. He said, I know that. So what you are doing? He said, I can do nothing because I'm needing the accreditation board. So I know, as president of this university, I don't need that. What I need is what you are saying, that I have to do other things because my accreditation problem, if I don't get the accreditation problem, I don't get the money that I need. So the problem is really a hard, complex problem. It goes to the minister, it goes to the government of the country, you see, sometimes. Not here in the state, but it goes up. It's really complex, the problem. So this is why yesterday I was telling people, we're going to start some movement. We need young people, because this problem is going to take at least 30 years to be solved. And I'm not going to live 30 years. So we need young people, as diplomats, as missionaries, as enthusiasts, that they can suffer this kind of fight, because this kind of fight is a suffering process.
How many of you have heard of John Warfield? Do you know who John Warfield was? He died 2 years ago. John Warfield. He was the editor of the journal Systems Research, and he was an engineer initially, and then he got into decision making. He worked for Battelle Memorial Institute. He worked for Ford Motor Company, Burroughs Corporation. He was at the University of Virginia, and George Mason University. But mostly what I know him for is editor of the journal Systems Research. And so he experienced both the flowering of systems and cybernetics and the shutting down of the field. And he said what killed these interdisciplinary research institutes was the accreditation boards. Because if you have a system science institute that had some management and healthcare and public administration and mathematics and psychology every time the accrediting organization would come through and they say, oh, you have some management stuff over here. Well, that has to go over here to the business school or we won't accredit the business school. Well, you got to accredit the business school. That's where your money is. So you carve off that little piece and you put it over here. Then the public administration folks come through and they say, oh, you've got some public administration over here. Well, that has to go in the public administration department. So you carve that off. Then you put it over. Pretty soon you don't have a system science institute anymore. So he says, there's got to be a solution to this. And he suggested that you think of a university as having 3 colleges. There's the Heritage College, which is everything you've learned from the past. Science, humanities, etc. Then you have the Professional College, which is business, law, medicine. And then you have the Horizons College, which is not past-oriented or present-oriented, but future-oriented. And it's design-oriented. And the core curriculum is systems and cybernetics. So you can have a professional career practicing systems and cybernetics. And the activities of the Horizons College would be funded, at least in part, by clients who were paying for solutions to multidisciplinary problems. When Russ Akoff was at the University of Pennsylvania in the Wharton School, he ran his PhD program like a consulting firm. So that he would get a corporate client that had a problem, he would assign a doctoral student to work on the client, and then you would bill the client for the faculty and student time spent thinking about this problem. And usually what they developed were new methods, new management methods as opposed to theories. Because with a method, the observer is in the process. That it's how do you act vis-a-vis the system. So that idea has been proposed. It's on the line. If you want to find the article, just look up wand waiver solution. Wand as in to wave a magic wand, because this is hard to do. Wand waiver solution. Just do a Google search on that. It'll take you straight to the article. I think it's called The Great University. So the idea is, how do you create a great university? And the idea is that the faculty in the other 2 colleges, the Heritage College and the Professional College, would go through the Horizons College from time to time when their expertise was required. And then they would go back. So it would serve as a kind of catalyst. And when you went into the Horizons College, you would work in a multidisciplinary team on a practical problem, and then you'd go back to doing your disciplinary thing. So I haven't heard of a better solution than that. But in his article...
Would that be accredited, though?
Pardon?
Would that have a college be accredited?
You would probably have to have an accrediting board for Horizons colleges. In other words, you could maintain the accrediting system for the other 2 colleges, but you would probably have to have a new accrediting board for this. But the whole point of the Horizons colleges is so that the president of the university can say to the accrediting board, that's separate, that's something different. Keep your hands off the Horizons College. You can do these things over here. You sort of build a moat around it.
And the problem I see with that, though, is the problem that we brought up before, is the repository problem. If you're thinking of using the knowledge from the other colleges as a just-in-time issue, and you're also thinking of mathematics as providing things 2 or 3 centuries ahead of time, you've got an innate conflict there of thinking as mathematics is a heritage discipline. It isn't. And it's not a integrated discipline either. It does work with, we're happy, all mathematicians just about are happy to work with people, or at least think of working with people. But somebody is developing things that you don't know you need yet. And so they're going to be there maybe when you need them, but not for the people who are doing the research now. I don't know if that's fatal, but it's something that the word heritage sort of.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no solution is perfect.
I know.
I should suggest something like that to the president of the university. Don't that.
Yeah.
One other thing that
You know what he told me?
What?
That the problem that they have that the accrediting board is copying all what's going on in the state. They are copying them. So they are not thinking. They are just copying the standard about accreditation from the United States.
Oh, from the United States.
Yeah, so they're not thinking. They're just copying from here.
Stuart, one other thing that can be done, perhaps this has been done, is simply gather all the successes of interdisciplinary research. All the diseases, all the theorems, all the industrial products, explain how this happened through, through two disciplines collaborating and put the passion with that. And that way, whenever you have to go to any place, it says, look, there's a well-known research book. There are 300 cases in the past few years. Maybe have some estimates how much money it saves society, and we need to go forward with it.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I've had that idea recently myself too. That you need to collect the good examples.
We're offering something we need evidence.
And yes, right.
And the bad examples.
Yeah.
For example, BlackBerry, who was milking their cash cow and didn't do research. So there's a number of bad examples that say if you don't structure the process properly, part of which includes interdisciplinary research for the future, then your company's horizon is very short. And there's a number of examples that you can add to that stack and say, okay, here's the guys who did it right, here's the guys who did it wrong. What was the difference? These guys planned for the future, these guys didn't.
Good. Okay. I think
When I was the dean in our university in research, I suggested to go the way Japan went. At the time, I'm talking about 25 years ago, in our country it used to be called copy engineering. Copy engineering. To copy engineering. And it had, several years, each year, where they would do something. So they told me that I was corrupting the university about copying. They confused copy with plagiarism. I told them, hey, you think it is easy copy? Copy that. Copy that, because if you can copy that, you will gonna make a lot of money. Copy that. Copy anything you want. And you can see that copying is extremely difficult. Because to copy, you have to innovate. So after that, the name was reverse engineering. Now see, the name was reverse engineering in the Stanford thing, the valley, the Silicon Valley. So it was a kind of prestige, Reverse engineering. Oh, you mean reverse engineering? Yes, let's do that. Just the change of the name. Developing countries need to implement copying engineering. Copy that. That's required engineering, not science. Copy that. Copy that.
And the quality improvement.
Copy that. Copy anything. If you can copy anything with less cost than the one who's doing that, you are a millionaire. Copy it. So why we cannot have engineers in copy?
They're doing that with 3D printers.
Yeah, yes, you're right.
And the thing is really weird about this, are you ready for this, folks? I learned about 3-4 weeks ago, maybe I'm really behind the times, they are copying food. They've got one of these damn things that can actually create, that you could have go down to whatever, buy something, some food, you put it in this frigging thing, they'll scan it, they'll copy it. A 3D printing food. It's not a stock or whatever. They're copying food, they're making houses, they're making any damn thing that, I don't care what it is on this table, they can copy the damn thing.
And they are doing money.
Oh yeah.
If they are doing money, but not robbing money, that means that they are useful to someone that they are paying them the money, so they are useful. you want to have the best metaphor that I can, it's as Bill Gates. He had all the millions of the world and he didn't drop them. He was useful to the people paying him money. So if you are earning a lot of money and not dropping the money, that's the measure how useful you are to society.
However, we all have different definitions of what we would call rock.
Okay, okay, I mean direct drawing, yeah, okay. I got it. You're right.
What smell that you have, that smell that's present in this hotel, you know who's in that same hotel with us, don't you? The Big M. Yeah. That's what you smell here. I had to get that.
Getting off the...
I suggest we try to wrap this up. Does anybody have any concluding statements or questions or suggestions on the subject of academic globalization? It's a good thing, a bad thing? Yes.
So a lot of the problems I've heard spoken about around the room actually deal more with what we as academics do. For example, the problems with the peer review system is that when we teach people in our classrooms, we don't teach them that they have an obligation to go with the education we're providing them. We teach them that they learn engineering science, they learn computer science, and we never tell them that it's your job to go back and educate the populace. It's your job to go back and do peer review and make sure that those people that are publishing in their fields are on the right track, and so that we don't go off on the wrong directions. Now, I'll mention George Washington University only because there are people in this room that know something about that. When I did an MBA there, it was during the days when they were going for quantitative management, and they were increasing the amount of course loads that had to do with managers doing quantitative analysis of systems. They took an ethics course, which used to be mandatory for MBAs, and they put it on the side and they said, okay, this is optional. You can add that to your curriculum or not. Bad decision academically. Academically, the collective academics, should have raised holy hell that the ethics is a basic part of any education. The responsibilities of a profession is a part of any education. And so a number of the problems that we're having here is because we suffered not to educate our students in those things.
That's the ethos. See, you're talking about ethos.
Yes.
So why we have, that's against the whole point of this damn thing. I came in with that monk suit a couple of years ago here. You know me. You see it on the video. The whole idea gets back to the old that monkishness, that we are the academicians. We're going to be the purveyors of knowledge quality. Why do you have knowledge quality? It gets to this, what we're about, and the pointy-headed philosopher and that kind of stuff. That's what you do. The ethics, don't forget, grows out of the ethos. See, you got ethos, ethics, and then morals. And the ethos is what you're about, why you're here, all that good stuff that gives rise to the way you go to implement it, i.e. the ethics, which come from a moral code and all this other good stuff. And that's why there's academics. What is academic? We're talking about technological globalization, which may facilitate the academics, but what is academics? And that's the ethos. That's what you're, thank you.
What you said is what differentiates, between education and instruction, and this is the title of the next conversational conference.
Okay, let me...
Because we are not giving higher education in our university, what we are giving in the best, is higher instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I am wrong.
Well, I think the other part of this, we've been talking as much about interdisciplinary links as global links. We're all, I think, well educated. We all have the ability to acquire knowledge about a variety of fields ourselves. We all read something, even if it's only on the internet. I don't try, I do it sort of naturally, to bring up every other subject in the university at least once during each course. And there are places where they come up. People need to see that there are connections via analogy, via overloading of words, via questions, via applications, whatever. What you're doing, whatever it is, has some interaction with every other discipline. in how you teach, in what you teach, in why you teach, in what the questions of the day are. Make the damn links, people.
Let me ask a question about the Horizons College and John Warfield's idea. How many of you find that idea appealing?
Appealing.
Appealing. Do you like it? Do you like the idea? Do you think it has any potential future? Are you willing to make it happen someplace?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe you would want to work together after the meeting today.
We can in the next conference work about the idea,
Yeah.
To let inform the people about what you are saying with more details.
Yeah. I think it's the best solution I've heard.
That's what we can.
I think it could be.
That's what here we can
Good
do.
idea.
I'm not in the university, so.
Okay, any other comments wrapping up this session?
Excuse me?
I'd say it's an interesting
Concluding comment.
topic to just really discuss in more details. For me, it is fascinating and interesting. I just feel that my experience, even though it's quite wide, but does not kind of let me comment about how to proceed. It's something I would like to learn more.
Yes, you're right.